Hello everybody, welcome. My name is Stacy Magadance. I'm one of the reference librarians here at FAO Library. This video is the first of three in support of the Chemistry 3500-3600 Library Lab assignment. Our goals for this video are to review the differences between popular and scholarly sources, including peer review, distinguish common types of science-focused articles, and learn how to get access to the SciFinder N database. All right, briefly, the differences between popular and scholarly. Popular sources just mean they're for anyone. They're for the people. They don't require special knowledge or background to understand. They're usually intended to inform or entertain, things like news reports or magazines or a podcast or even social media that you've put up yourself can be a form of popular information. They're generally produced very quickly and in the moment. Over on the far end of the scale from popular, you have scholarly. They are intended for a very specific audience, usually specialists in a particular research field. They do require special knowledge to understand. They aren't providing any explanations for people who don't already know what they're talking about. They tend to communicate research, original research, or other kinds of reviews of research. And they are often very slow to produce. It takes a lot of time to conduct the research, to have it go through a review process before it's published, and then to present to the world. There are some things that kind of fall into a gray area in the middle. Things like professional publications, which really aren't intended for everyone, but aren't necessarily using specialized research as their focus. But for our purposes, this is close enough. Talking for a minute about peer review. All right, in the peer review process, a scholar writes an article, submits it to a scholarly journal. The editors of that journal then submit it to other people who are experts in that same field to review it. Make sure that the research was done well, that it's adding something to the field, and so on. After a while, they may decide then, hey, could you make some revisions to this? We like it, but we need some changes. We have some questions. So once those revisions are made, hopefully then it gets accepted and published and becomes part of the scholarly record. So the idea behind peer review is that hopefully there's sort of a gatekeeper on quality and validity of academic research. However, there are obviously failures of every system. And there are failures of the peer review system as well. Most peer reviewers are volunteers. They are people like your professors who have many jobs to do, many hats to wear. They may be busy, they may be tired when they reviewed something. People who write and research are also subject to the same kind of temptations that everyone is, money, fame, and so on. So there have been cases of outright fraud. The hope, though, is that because the research has been put out there in the scientific world, other people will test it, try to reproduce it, and hopefully that means that failures will be found and then withdrawn. There is an interesting site called retractionwatch.com if you are curious about the kinds of things that do get retracted because they were found to have problems after they were published. Now, after that quick review, let's move on to look at some examples of articles that you might encounter while you are doing your research. I have here 3 sample articles I will use to demonstrate how you can analyze these to better understand what you're looking at. So first question, the authors. What do we know about them? Well, we have a list of the authors' names here, but it's not the names we care about so much. I noticed that next to each one of these, there's an A or a B, sort of a little footnote, referring down here. This is telling me that all of the A folks are working at the University of Grenoble in France, and all the folks in the B group are working at, looks like a chemical laboratory dealing with organic polymers, also in France. So I know that this whole big group of people who worked on this are probably all either professors or otherwise professional researchers out in the field. As far as authors, I like to also look down at the bottom of the first page if I have a PDF. There is listed here the contact information for the primary authors. So if you have questions, the correspondence can be directed to this person at this address. They've also given email addresses for the folks in this group. So this tells me that they are being very transparent about allowing themselves to be contacted with questions about this article. Let's move to the second one. Much smaller group here. There's only 3 in this case. I don't see anything right there, so let me move down to the bottom of my page. There I see. Again, we have the credentials of each person, where they work. This author is a professor at the University of Minnesota. These folks also work there, although they are not identified as professors. Let's see if we can find out anything else about them. Here, in fact, they've got nice little biographies of each of the authors, where they got their education, where they work now, and what their research interests are. So this person, as we already noted, is a professor. This is a graduate student at the university, and this person is a postdoctoral research associate working with the professor. So again, we know all about them, where they work, how to contact them. Third article. Well, we do have an author's name here. There's only one in this case, which is different from our other 2. The name is given, and then just this in the way of an affiliation, C&EN West Coast. Now, you don't know this, but this magazine that this article came from is called C&EN, which stands for Chemical and Engineering News. And the West Coast part of this probably means he works in their West Coast office or their West Coast news bureau. There's no way to contact him. Even if you look all through the article, you won't find anything else other than that he is employed, apparently, by this magazine as a staff writer. Next question. What can we say about the way citations are handled in the article? As I scroll through the text of this one, I do see some things that look like footnotes. So if I click one, it jumps me to the end of the article where I have the complete list of references, also called the bibliography or the works cited. There are quite a lot of them, and looking at them I can see they are clearly done according to some very regular pattern in order to keep them consistent. So a very formal style. Moving to our next article. Very much the same thing going on here. I can see that there are some footnote style things here. These aren't clickable, but if I jump to the end of the article, yes, I see them there. The long list of the works cited. This is a very long list, by the way. Although the style is a little different from the first article, clearly they're being done according to some set of rules to keep them all consistent and clear. Third article, when you look at the text, really doesn't have anything in the way of footnotes or even parenthetical citations. If I check the very end of the article, which is right here, yeah, there's nothing there in the way of works cited or a bibliography. There's just one kind of reference to an outside source here. That's this one. It's because they are discussing a previously published paper, but this is it for the entire thing. And even where there are things like a direct quotation, there's no citation because This is somebody that the author interviewed directly, so they're just taking it from their notes. Very informal, in other words. Third question, what's going on in the article? Or, more importantly, whose experiments are being reported on? I like to look at the abstract first. Now here I see a couple of tip-offs. There's the term, we assess such and such thing, or more importantly, we observed that something happened. That's a good sign that these folks are reporting on their own study that they designed and carried out. Let me also point out sort of a classic structure of a research report. There's an introduction. Okay, fine, lots of things have introductions. But here we have methods. So that means they are describing exactly how they carried out this study, what materials they used, what processes they went through, and so on. You will also find then typically a third section labeled something like this: results, what we found, in other words, and a discussion of the results. You will also typically find toward the end, although on this article it's very short, something called the conclusion. What conclusions can we draw based on our research, right? So that's a clear sign, all of that together, that this is an original report of empirical research carried out by the authors noted at the beginning of the article. Second example. Again, I like to look at the abstract. Here it says the goal of this article is to review the recently published literature. So right off the top, we know exactly what's going on here. This is not something reporting on original research studies conducted by the author. It's a review of other people's research. And in fact, you may have noticed there's a nice clear label up here that says it's a review. So these folks, although they are citing many things, they do not have a design, they have not done methods. What they are doing via their very, very long list of references here at the end, you may be surprised to see that there are 156 studies that have been consulted in this article. They have looked at all of those and they are summarizing the current state of research by analyzing all of those other different original research studies and looking at trends, pulling out things that might be of interest. Third article. This one really gives no indication at all of doing any kind of original research, and in fact the little blurb here says experts debate a controversial paper. All right, so they are referring to a published paper, and in fact it was a review paper, not an original research study, but that's it. All the rest of this is interviewing people who have some opinion about that paper that was published, summarizing the issues around it, and so on. It's not attempting to do any sort of comprehensive review of research in this field. It's just discussing why people found this particular thing so interesting, right? So more of a kind of newsy, current events or current awareness type of article. Question: who is the intended audience for this? Who would read this article? Well, after you look at this for very long, you'll become aware that this is very advanced stuff. It is not explained for people who don't already understand what's going on. It's a very specific kind of study, and it's using very formal, very advanced language. So probably the people who would be interested in this are other people like the authors, who are doing research in this area and want to learn from this study. What has gone well, what has not, what kind of things they examined. So the audience can use this to inform their own research and hopefully advance the knowledge in the field. In our second one, really very much the same, even though the purpose of this is a little different. These folks didn't design their own original research, but by summarizing other people's research, they've made it easy for people who are actually doing original research in this area to catch up quickly on what's going on in this field, right? So the likely audience for this is, again, other people researching in this field, doing work on this subject, even students like yourself who are maybe encountering this research topic for the first time and need an introduction to what's going on. One of the best things about these reviews is that you can go down to the end where you have all of these many studies that have been gone through. You find a citation, you can then find that article and learn from it yourself. Right, third article. Who's the intended audience here? Well, this is much less formal. The language is not so technical. It's much easier to understand. There are no footnotes to deal with. Even though there are nice graphics, they're not conveying research data reported. They're there to provide an explanation. And also, there's just a lot of newsy things here, people's opinions, and so on. So, although this is a fairly specialized thing, right, it might not interest just everybody out in the world, but anyone who was interested in medical technology could probably read this and understand it. Including people who are in the field, but maybe people who aren't in the field, who might just have an interest in this topic. So, which of our 3 articles is peer-reviewed? Well, if you guessed both articles 1 and 2, you're correct. Although it can be a little difficult to tell for certain whether something underwent peer review, because that's something that takes place at the journal level. For example, if you went to the journal's homepage, it would tell you what their reviewing policy was. However, I can see here that this article was received on such and such date, then it was revised, and the revised version was accepted later on. So I can actually tell here that this underwent peer review and was changed in response to the peer review. On our second article, it says it was received, and then it says when it was published. It doesn't indicate that it had to be revised, but it's still a fair indication that it did undergo some peer review. On our third article, it just doesn't apply. There's no research here that needs to be verified or looked at critically. It's a news article, and it's reporting on people's opinions, and so it's doing what it needs to do. If you look at the end, you won't see anything about submission dates or any kind of review. So although it didn't have peer review, I'm sure the editors of the magazine would have taken a look at it to see if it was the kind of article they wanted to publish. Now that you understand how to recognize some of that scientific literature, let's talk about how to find it. For that, we're going to use one of the library's specialized research databases. They are grouped here by subject, so we'll go to chemistry. And on that list, we want SciFinder, also known as chemical abstracts. The library's databases are mainly part of the deep web, meaning they require a subscription, and they aren't readily available to the general public. Part of this process with SciFinder is that the very first time you use it, you must create a SciFinder specific login. You have to use your CSUSB official email address, and it does have a lot of requirements for the password, so be aware of that. Once you've created it, you're good to go. Then you're going to go to the SciFinder database. Don't try to create multiple accounts. It won't let you do that. That wraps up part 1 of our tutorial. The next 2 videos will demonstrate how to use the references search and the substances search in SciFinder so you can complete your assignment. Thanks for watching.